So this hangout is now live, and yes, Essence of Thought is not going to make it today. So I am going to try to do many things that aren't going to probably work out so well, but that's par for the course in my life. So this has to do with Sam Harris, the cult of Sam Harris. Some people want to say, well, why am I using that silly title in this hangout? And I really want to talk about reputation and how people try to undermine reputation by labeling. Does that picture in the background bother you? Bothers me, but I'm not going to change it. You're just going to have to deal with it, because that means you'd see my ass when I got up to change the picture. Anyways, moving right along. So there's a lot of things I went over in the video, the character assassination of Sam Harris, but why do it? Why is it important? One of the big things that kept coming up in the comment section of that video was a sense that he's overreacting to people's criticism. But when you're called a bigot, when someone says to you, you don't have a right to be saying this, and you're a big bigot. So on one hand, he doesn't even have a right to say anything, and on the other hand, he's a bigot for saying it. And to say he didn't have the right was in the sense that he wasn't the expert that should be saying something. But if anyone has studied Harris, as I have, you know that his background, he's more than qualified to make a comment about humanity. We all are. And to the extent that any one person is an expert on humanity, it's very undemocratic, and it's very dangerous that we have just the elites running the world, because the elites aren't running the world that are necessarily qualified. So if your arguments are so complicated and the behaviors they dictate are so impossible to understand that someone like Sam Harris can't understand it and talk about it intelligently, then you're basically saying we're all screwed, because it's essential that each one of us has the ability to comprehend the issues that are put to us in the world, that we don't have just a set of experts that can talk intelligently about that. One of the biggest problems we have in philosophy is this idea of experts. We only listen to the experts. We don't listen to the lay person, because what do they know? Some of it's life experience. Some of it is just a novel way of looking at the problem. And that's the reason that I brought up the whole issue of, in the video, if you watch the video, I talk about how people made statements like lighter than air, or air travel won't be possible. There's a specific quote, and that, unfortunately, I was stupid and I didn't have it ready to re-quote it. But in 1889, the prominent scientist of the time, it was 1898, because he was making predictions about the future for the coming century. And he made some silly statements about mechanical flight will not be possible, etc. And the point in that is that he's an expert, and he makes predictions about the future, or he makes, says, in a sense, what he was saying was it's not even worth looking into, because it's not possible. So when something's not possible, then we don't investigate it. And that's a problem if it is possible. And clearly it was possible, because we have planes today. And the other quote was the imagination necessary to imagine the future, when Thomas Watson of IBM said there will never be a need for more than 5 computers in the world, because he couldn't imagine any other use for computer technology. And that's an example of just a narrow-minded way of looking at a problem. So when Reza says something like X, Y, and Z, he's discounting the novel viewpoint. And that's often where technologies come from, specifically, is from a novel viewpoint. But I would argue that it comes from all walks of life. In terms of whatever we do, it's that novelty, that not the same old way of doing so, but a new way of looking at the problem, fresh eyes. And they've shown, there's a book called Imagination, and they look at how we discover new ways of doing things is by using our imagination. And our imagination is fueled in a variety of ways, but it's the outsiders have a huge advantage in certain fields. One of the, they go through many different fields and how you excite imagination. Like, for example, my favorite issue was in terms of brainstorming. Not all ideas are good ideas, and that you need to hash them out. You need to defend your ideas. You can't just say, well, that's an idea, that's an idea, that's an idea. They're not all equal. The ideas, there are good ideas and there are bad ideas. So if Rez's ideas are better than Harris's ideas, then there should be a nice discussion about those ideas, not to say, well, you're not qualified to present an idea. It should be taken and dismissed as the idea why it's wrong. Now, Harris's point is exceptionally simple when you break it down to a scientific fact. Now, when Reza says, when he uses statistics of other countries that aren't violent or do have a better human quality of life, it's just that is actually a valid argument, because Harris's argument is the smoking argument that I tried to impress upon people. Is like, if I'm saying smoking causes cancer, I'm making it very tangible. How do I know that's true? And the only way to really know that's true, because it isn't a direct link to smoking causing cancer, it's an indirect link that smoking causes cancer. And it doesn't cause cancer. It increases the likelihood that you'll get certain types of cancers because of the nature of the free radicals that it puts into your body. So when people say smoking causes cancer, I think they're allowed to put that on cigarettes because the causal link is so strong. But what it really is doing is it's increasing the likelihood that you'll get cancer, because your genetics plays a huge part in you're not getting cancer. You say, well, how does this do with religion? Well, it has everything to do in the same context. If ideas are in the system that could lead to violent behavior, then, and you see this violent behavior, you can statistically show it, of a certain type of violent behavior, then you have a relationship between a religion and an outcome. Now, of course, it's more complicated, and Reza is absolutely correct when he says that. He's also correct when he says we need to get along. I agree with that. These are all very important things. One is simply an observation saying this leads to X. A second question you can ask is, what are the prescriptions? And that would be something that Reza should be very interested in, is in prescriptions. And actually later on, he did write a prescriptive blog post about how we should all get along. And we agree. There's no problem with that, because that is in fact true. That is the prescription. That is a good prescription, because we know that social and cultural contacts are the best ways to break down barriers between people. It's just, if you have a physical contact with someone, if you know someone personally, it makes it easier to communicate, and you build trust in that way. It's really hard to build trust with someone that you can't really identify. They're just sort of this alien person. And we all do this, and it's a very bad thing to do, to vilify someone with these ad hominem attacks. And we just, well, they're just a bigot. We can't listen to them because they're just bigots. And that's really the reason why we call someone a bigot, and we say they're just unreasonable. And I'll call it a cult. That's why, and again, back to my title, The Cult of Harris. When you label for the sole purpose of reason nullification, I like that term. I don't know if anyone else likes the term, but I like the term reason nullification. This is what I'm talking about. This is why this is so important. This is why it's about the question. And because this is live, and because I'm not editing this you get what you get. And I'm thinking about, there's a lot of different directions that I wanted to take this conversation than just about what Harris and in terms of our lives. And I'm thinking, one of the things that was rolling through my mind was, in terms of our reputation, a question came up in my comment section of the video, was a 9/11 conspiracy theory. And I researched it at one point, and I pretty much, I don't give it much thought. But I also depend on people that I trust to give me good information. And one of those people that I pointed out to the specific commenter was Michael Shermer. And do I agree with everything Michael Shermer agrees with? No, but I understand where he's coming from, and I understand his ability to analyze a problem and things he might say and things he might not say. And we need to trust people. We need to trust people that people are being honest. And part of Harris's biggest problem with Reza is in terms of his inability. He thinks he's being dishonest. Whether that's true or not, it's something Reza needs to deal with. I mean, what we're calling him is dishonest in many respects. And I can't say that he's honest or dishonest, but I've seen him say things that are very inconsistent. And he definitely tried to do a character assassination. Now, back to the 9/11. When someone brings up that issue, we can't immediately assume they're crazy. They may not have all the information. They may not have... we need to know exactly what it is they think happened and why they think it happened. So to simply vilify someone, which someone tried to do in that comment section, I say, no, absolutely not. I don't know this person. I don't know exactly why they believe it. So I pointed to Shermer and I said, okay, give me the reasons why you think Shermer's wrong, because I trust him. But that doesn't mean he's always right. So knowing the people you can trust and you can present them and going, well, this person did this research. I did my own research and they agreed with my conclusions. So we're kind of at, so I think this happened. Okay. We could both be wrong. And it is always a good exercise to reevaluate what are the assumptions you're making in your conclusion that something didn't happen. It's an exercise. Think of it as an exercise. Don't think of it as, oh God, I got to do it again. Think of it's going to help you be more critical of your own work and how to analyze someone else's work. So when Essence of Thought goes through a video, I mean, for me personally, it's tedious, it's monotonous, but I go through it with them because it helps me go, okay, that's correct. That way, or, it's an exercise. It's a mental exercise. And a lot of the stuff that we do on YouTube, if you care about the conversation, if you care about getting it right, then a lot of this stuff is simply an exercise in learning how to get it right. And you should care about your reputation in that if you're here to get it right, then you're going to make those statements that you are interested in getting that information correct. And that's going to lead to your information. That's going to lead to your reputation. And I believe that we're all going to have to be more sensitive to our reputations online. That we have it's an opportunity, but it's also a responsibility. Not to simply say that's their responsibility, that we're going to do it in the free press. We're going to do it in there's only one way to do that. With the ability to talk to anyone in the world, a lot changes. You can get perspectives from a worldwide audience. Impossible to do before. I couldn't go out my door and say, hey, anyone that's listening, and have 1,000 people from around the world, thousands of people from around the world, as it turns out, And actually, that was one thing I wanted to share with you, is the level of responsibility, even for a YouTube video like the character assassination of Sam Harris. It tells us a lot about the interests. It tells us a lot about the worldwide interests, which kind of shocked me. And I wanted to actually share that with you. And if I do this right, we should be able to do that. This one here. Okay. Okay, so we're going to go. I have to go to analytics. Okay, so this should be, everyone should be looking at this. So the character assassination video, and I don't even know if I'm supposed to show you this, but I'm going to do it in anyways and get in trouble. It's my content, but it's amazing the demographic information of the world in terms of who is looking at this information, who's engaged in the conversation about a silly guy named Sam Harris and a silly guy named Reza, and then me, who the hell am I for presenting this information? People have presented that to me. So, well, who the fuck are you? You're not an authority. And I agree with you. I'm not, but I try to be careful with what I say, and I try to be honest with what I'm saying. So I really thought it was more interesting. They don't make the first page. Do they? I'm pretty sure they do make the first page. But you can see that particular video, you think it's just United States, and it's mostly the United States. But a few people from around the world actually watched it for quite a bit of time. And some of these countries, I don't even know where they are. So that was just my experience with looking at the data and how the data, it changes the way you look at things. It changes the way you, maybe not in a good way. I sometimes wonder about that. Yeah, this is going to crazy places in my mind, because I'm thinking about Sam Harris's reputation. And while he goes to crazy lengths to protect it. And he goes to that because there's people from all over the world that are coming with all this different information, maybe very limited amounts of information. And this is something we need to be careful of. Where are we getting our information, and being honest about that? Maybe that's a biased perspective, right? And the internet, usually you can find a alternative perspective, and it's kind of behooves us to really go and try to comprehend what the alternative perspective is saying. What is it about their arguments that at least you can understand their perspective? And that's where it came to elitism. I had a huge discussion with elitism. In fact, the cult of Sam Harris came from a guy named David. I think he's a British guy. I did some research on him, but he doesn't really have a reputation. And to know this, when you make comments on my videos, at least, I do research the reputation of the person that's making the comment to try to understand where they might be coming from. And I think that's something that we should all consider when responding to someone. Where might they be coming from? If it's really off the wall, especially if it's off the wall. Maybe they're trying to be funny. Maybe, we don't know specifically what they mean by what they say necessarily. And we got to put it in context. And it's kind of takes it's on us now more than it's ever been. It's not necessarily on a publisher to do that research for us. We're going to say, okay, I came to this opinion about this person. Is it consistent with the character of that person? And with, it's silly to say, but I have enough content where you can answer that question for yourself. You don't necessarily need to ask me to answer some of the questions that you may have for yourself. I don't mind repeating if I have to, but it's interesting that, yes, many people can have enough content where you can make a rough estimate of the type of person they are, or where they probably stand on specific issues based on how much information they've already put out there. So that's why I feel very comfortable in speaking authoritatively about what Sam Harris would say, because he's actually created a body of work. And he often, you'll note he stated that in the interview. If you bothered to watch the interview, the 3-hour podcast is mind-numbing. But I felt obligated to watch that particular episode. But in there, he makes the point. He says, actually, it wasn't there. I'm sorry. Scratch that. It wasn't even there. It was somewhere else. But he did make a point in one of his blog posts that he realized that Ben Affleck, for example, had no knowledge of the work that he had, what he had written. He had no knowledge of who Sam Harris was for any practical purpose. And that would be true of me until recently of Reza's work. So I had to go out of my way to sort of say, well, who is this person and where is he coming from? So I actually went to a 2007 video, and I actually reviewed that video to who is he as a person. So do a few reviews to find out where he stands as a person, trying to get a feel for how he presents problems. And it's not a question of whether we agree or disagree. At this point, we want to establish a character, the type of character he is. And people will disagree with me probably in the fact that, well, it's people present what they want to present. And I say, well, to a certain extent, we don't have a lot of control over what we present. I mean, I don't have a lot of control right now in terms of I am who I am, and I'll present in the way that I normally present. I mean, well, if you act, well, yes, to a certain extent you can, but there's really something to a character, and so you can, if you spend the time, you can really learn a lot about a person and their character now with content online, especially with video content, because there's a lot of nonverbal communication that goes on. I personally really enjoyed the series Lie to Me, because a lot of that is based on real psychological studies and real emotional things. And you go, yeah, actually, that's kind of true, isn't it? And the person actually came up with those theories for that particular TV show, had actually worked very diligently at finding universal facial expressions, things that are really hard to hide when someone's communicating with you. So that's where video gives you more. We're more attuned to facial expressions and in terms of how we interact. So yes, when you see someone, it does make a difference. Regardless, we also get very critical of what they look like, but it does help us better understand who that person is. It can work against us, but it can also work for us, in that we know the person doesn't mean harm necessarily by what they're saying, because we can see it in their character and in their expression. So that's the part of I just looked down and saw no viewers, which I forgot I had that ability there, which is good that I'm all alone. I'm all alone. Anyways, talking to myself, talking to the ether that is. But this will still be recorded live. I was like, who would I piss off if I quit right now? I am going to make this go live, piss off Essence of Thought. But I think I am going to cut it short. I've rambled quite enough about the concept of reputation. Showed you a little bit about the YouTube. Yeah, I really encourage people to get out there and be a part of a community, and to take what they do seriously. Whether or not it seems serious We need to communicate. And what I try to remind people, and what I wanted to sort of get into, it is about the discussion. It is about the conversation. And whether you know it or not, our conversation is radically changing. I see stuff in the news, in places, and I think, wow, that came from social media. In fact, an interesting South Park on the Oculus Rift. Now, I'm a techie. I'm very aware of technology. And I thought they did an absolutely awesome job on their South Park episode on the Oculus. It's funny as hell. But one of the comments in that video was about a guy saying, "Oh, they're just rehashing old things. They're not doing anything original. They're pandering to the younger generation." I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm young. Thank you for that compliment. And he wasn't. He was actually, I don't know how old he was, but he's not as old as his picture showed him to be, which is like 30s or 40s at the latest. So, anyways, now I had a point with that South Park video. Had to do with reputation. And for the life of me, it just escapes me where I was going with that. Sucks. Anyways, guess it was in terms of, it's their reputation in terms of being original, being where do you get original content from? Because in this case, it was all social media. And say, well, it's social media. It doesn't have any substance. It doesn't have any real news in it. Like, where does news come from? News comes from the world. It comes from actual activities. It comes from what people are talking about. Social media is just as real as any other medium for getting information. Do you think when they talk on The View that anything more interesting is happening? They're just coming up with shit. They're just looking at something and say, well, that's interesting. I'm going to talk about it. Now, they have different sources to choose from, and they're going to have, which is more important, which is more interesting, et cetera, than what happens to hit the fancy on social media. But in a sense, it's the same thing. So to say one is more real than the other, I don't want you to go there. One is different than the other. The sources are different. The people are different. But it's still stuff. And that's really all it is stuff. Why would you want to do a story on Russia, and a war? I mean, we're always talking about war. Why not do something fun, something inspirational, sort of and that's why I like that particular South Park video. I thought it was really on to something that's it was very aware of itself. And that's okay to, people say, well, you shouldn't be so social media as if it's not real. I just was shocked by that. It's not real because it's about social media. It's about stuff you read on social media. That struck me as odd. That struck me as really odd that someone would say that about where we should get our information from. So criticize, yes, but be prepared to understand where your criticism comes from, where the foundation of your ideas are. And that's something that we all can work on. I can work on, everyone can work on. Where are our ideas coming from? What is the fundamental belief? And this was the interesting thing. And again, back to the video, and I want to close this out because it's elitism. I want to talk about elitism very specifically. There's an interesting book on what elitism is, and I do have a link to the Twilight of the Elite, the writer of that. And what's important to understand is the responsibilities that we expected the elites to do. We're in trouble. We're in trouble because more and more we need to be responsible for curating our own information and putting together the pieces. And it isn't, if an elite So let's use a doctor's example. I go to a doctor for his expertise and his knowledge. But I also have to keep in the back of my mind that I need to be responsible for the treatments that he might prescribe and understanding those treatments to the best of my ability. And most of the time we can. And if we ask, they'll explain why exactly this treatment they're giving, what they expect, why they think it's right. Now, you may have information that is germane to that conversation, but only if you take the time to try to actually understand what it is they're trying to accomplish. So the doctor may have special information that has a better view, but you also have a view that is critical, and you can help that view by being informed yourself so that it's more of a partnership. If I want to build a chicken coop, telling the hardware salesperson what my problem is and what I'm trying to accomplish, he can point out to me why certain things are used and certain things are not used. Like I say, well, it's cheaper plywood. Well, it is cheaper plywood, but it doesn't wear and weather. So, and you can paint it, it kind of preserves it somewhat, et cetera, et cetera. So you can then make an educated decision on whether or not you can handle those defects, or you want to go with a more expensive product. So there's a trade-off with making those decisions. Sometimes you'll say, no, I don't care. If it lasts 2 years, I'm a happy camper. I only need it to last 2 years. I don't need it to last the rest of my life. And these are things we do in expertise. This is what an expert should be giving us, not telling us we don't have an opinion. That we can't have an opinion. We can't have an informed opinion. Of course we can. Please inform us. So anyway, something I hope somebody thinks about someday. But anyways, this is the one-man show. Instead, as in the thought did not show up. And we'll be talking again at you. Thanks for watching.